I'm not looking at it.
Good?
I'm just so scared up there. I'm memorizing.
Okay, so that we could get started. We have a special Board of Finance meeting, at which the only item on the agenda is to approve a request for funding for the for printing, postage, and return postage of a public opinion survey on the Country Club of Woodbridge. So I will move acceptance of request for funding 1718-10 in the amount of $3,000.
Second.
Okay. Beth, would you just like to maybe run through where this came from, et cetera?
This was something that was my idea following the election, and I thought it would be a good idea to find out the pulse of the town again. I think I told you about this maybe at last meeting when we met last week, but we've had several iterations of the survey, and we're now at the final stage, and the Board of Selectmen met this evening, and the survey is ready to go out. Hopefully it'll go out next week, and this is to cover the postage, et cetera, that Matt explained. And anybody have any questions regarding it, or it'll hopefully, we have Amity High School, thank you, Rick Bordeaux and his class of statisticians to be, going to help us with tabulating the results. And I would just ask you all again to be ambassadors for this and get it out. Make sure, tell all your friends and neighbors it's very important to get it back. There'll be a postage paid envelope in the envelope that goes out, and we hope to have a pretty good return. So we're looking forward to seeing what the pulse of Woodbridge is on the biggest issue we've got in town right now, I think. So
And you guys will be publicizing it, I heard
absolutely.
library.
We're going to put up signs,
Yeah.
reminding folks that it's here, that it's check your mail, it's coming. So we hope to have it out next week. It's going to the printer tomorrow, maybe? Yep. It was delayed a week because we had some further discussions to have at the Board of Selectmen level, so thank you.
Any questions or any comments? Or, no? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Approved. And I'll make a motion, we adjourn the special meeting of the Board of Finance.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. And, okay, I believe we can get started with our joint, this is the first of three joint Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meetings for the purposes of reviewing the various budgets for the town. In the past, Amity has come to the Board of Finance meeting usually after all these meetings and presents it to the Board of Finance, but due to the very timely preparation of the Amity budget, we were able to work it out so that our Superintendent Dumais will be able to present his budget tonight to both the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, which I thought was a good thing to do. Last night, it's Chip, okay, Dr. Dumais. Chip presented the budget to the Finance Committee. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Finance Committee is made up of 3 members of the Board of Education, 1 from each town. Our Woodbridge representative is, what's her name? Pat. Right. We all know Pat. And the other 3 members are the members of the 3 town boards of finance, 1 from each town. And I could say that Chip does a great job presenting his budget, and the presentation was well received, and it appeared, there were other members of the Board of Ed there, and it appears though it's going to have the support of the towns and the Board of Ed. So with that, I will give this over to Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Charles Dumais, also known as Chip.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to be here. I'm going to just turn this a little bit. So,
Should kill that one.
yeah. Good. I apologize ahead of time. I'm going to hit the high points. The presentation the full presentation is a little long. The key is that you have a budget book with you, and everything that we talk about in this presentation is supplemented in that document. So some of the graphs up here have 3 categories. The document has 6. Right? So it's definitely broken down so that you have all the details. One of the things that I'm proudest of in working in Amity with regards to finances is the level of transparency in what is done and how the money is spent. It's all right there. And so when we talk about the budget process, we're really talking about a whole number of things that go into this. So I'll start by saying that the budget that was presented to the administration from the school level has been pretty much the tightest that we've seen. And I say that because I'm really proud of the process. We don't have a process where people ask for 20 of something anticipating they're going to get 5. They ask for 5 if they need 5. And so we've come really close to earlier in the process knowing exactly what people's needs are. So. We start with the Amity mission statement. Our budget is really an educational plan. It's an educational plan that pays for what we do for Amity students, and that's to help them become lifelong learners, literate, caring, creative, and effective world citizens. The Board of Education is the largest in the state of Connecticut for regional and municipal boards with 13 people. We have representation from each of the 3 towns represented by Amity: Orange, Bethany, and Woodbridge. As Matt said, the Finance Committee is, well, up until now, unique in Connecticut. If you've been following the changes in the law, the regional schools now are to reach out to boards of ed. We're still working on those rules, but we're definitely ahead of where we're supposed to be. So we have 1 representative from each of the towns from the Board of Ed and 1 representative from each of the towns from the boards of finance. Amity has had 2 or 3 goals that have driven its work: improve instruction, be more efficient, and address the social emotional needs of our students and staff. We'd like to start off with a picture of where the money is going and what's happening and really the quality of education that happens at Amity. So I'll hit a couple of these things that are rather fantastic. We don't know who the National Merit finalists are, but we currently have 7 National Merit semifinalists. I think we had 6 finalists last year, so we anticipate a number of finalists out of this. The U.S. Senate Youth Program, there are 2 students from the state of Connecticut that are picked to participate in the U.S. Senate Youth Program. One of them was from Amity, and one of the runner-ups. So that's a big deal. That's quite an achievement. Our Teacher of the Year was a semifinalist for the state of Connecticut. We have professionals who are presenting nationally as well as regionally, which goes to attest to the quality of our staff. And I put the College Board up here. In the last year, Amity Regional High School offered more tests and had more students take them than ever in its history, which is, in combination with good scores, a really positive thing for schools. But perhaps the most positive thing is that when we talk about where we want kids to be and their vision of a graduate and what we'd like students to be years from now, the AP, or the Advanced Placement part of the College Board, offers what's called AP Capstone. And it's more representative of what we want kids to be able to do, to research and work on things that they come up with on their own that are within some type of framework supported by the College Board. There are 12 schools, not 12 school districts, but 12 schools in the state of Connecticut that offer AP Capstone, and we are one. Another big deal in terms of what we're trying to do for kids. We are continuously improving our instruction by participating in a practice called instructional rounds, very similar to medical rounds. Teachers go from class to class and work hard to improve instructional practice. Governor's Scholars, we've had, Governor's Scholars is a cold write, meaning that students are delivered an essay and must write right then what their response is. And our kids just do a good job. We've had 2 Governor's Scholars 2 years in a row, or 1 each 2 years. I put Amity Enterprises on here because we talk a lot about manufacturing and alternatives to a college education, we'll say. And we have an enterprise program that connects our manufacturing class with our marketing class and our business classes, and they produce products that they sell to the community. It is an opportunity for kids to learn about more than just your core subject areas. Oh, physical fitness. Well, and I think this is another big deal. More than 75% of all of our 8th graders passed all 4 sections or all 4 parts of the Connecticut physical fitness test. Throughout the presentation, we talk about DERG, Demographic Reference Group. We're talking about these 21 schools or 19 districts in Connecticut that are socioeconomically similar to the Amity district. In the past, I've shown test scores where we might have looked at AP scores, we might have looked at SAT scores. This is more representative of what we do. We pay more attention to individual tests, what are called universal assessments. Every student takes it, and it's in math, and it's in English language arts. And instruction and classroom activities are directed specifically towards what those students' needs are. So the nice thing is that each of the elementary districts currently uses this STAR program as well, and that information is transferred to Amity, and we're better able to help those students transition. Athletics, a number of division championships, state tournament participation, coaches of the year, a phenomenal supportive program for our kids. But more importantly is this piece right here. Last year and this current year, Amity was recognized with the Michaels Achievement Cup for being a Class Act school, exemplary athletic program. Great athletes, great teams, great programs, great kids. This is more important than any state championship that we could win. Did I say 2 years in a row?
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 years in a row. All right. We continue to support strong academic and athletic programs with phenomenal performances in the arts. So Fiddler on the Roof, the main show at the high school last year. And I put the music on there. I don't know how Club Council stayed on here. But the excellent and superior ratings are at adjudications where our middle school bands go out and they perform and they get judged. Gold and platinum are the best that you could possibly do. Their performance is fantastic. Outside of school or through school, and some of these are traditional ones. We do St. Baldrick's every year, but hurricane relief. Our students really stepped up this year and collected hundreds of pounds of supplies in order to support people who have been affected by hurricanes. Pupil Services and curriculum. The Unified Theater is part of the Unified Sports and Unified Activities programs for our special education students. We do secure grant money, and we did for a one-to-one initiative. The most important part of moving to one-to-one. One-to-one means every student has a device. The most important part is making sure that the staff is ready for them and appropriately trained to have professional development. So this grant is actually to do the professional development first. Today we sent a team over to the old firehouse to take a second look in planning for the 18 to 21 transition program that we certainly hope we'll be able to take advantage of that facility. Not only is it a great thing for kids, it is something that is a great thing for the community. Having the opportunity, a transition program, so that you know, is by law we're required to educate students in special education to the age of 21. And these are students who need some assistance in transitioning from a high school environment to a post-high school environment, and that's what those 3 years are for. So this would be about job training and about how to run an apartment and that kind of thing, and how to do so many other things. So we're going to partner with the university as well, and we are on the way to have a fantastic program in place for the fall. Parent University, and we have one coming up. It's Courage to Speak, I believe, on the 31st. A little bit about drug abuse and the opioid crisis. But Parent University is our effort to educate the community on what's happening in school. We continue to coordinate with the 3 member districts. And I put STEAM Day up on there because one of the things that we do in supporting science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics is we send buses down and pick up all the 5th graders and bring them up to the high school for STEAM Day, expose them to all those different initiatives. Operations, we've moved beyond being model schools for Tools for Schools, which is about air quality in schools. to being efficient. And so that means participating in the Connecticut Green Leaf Schools program. Our financial practice is fantastic. And I say that as evidenced by 8 consecutive clean audits. Clean audits means that there was nothing found in our financial operations that required the auditors to say, hey, this is not the way you're supposed to do it. Coupled with the fact that there are no formal recommendations to improve those operations is quite a feat for 8 years in a row. By the way, Terry Loomis, Director of Finance Administration, is here with me tonight. She's the one that's responsible for that. I just signed. The last one on the list is, if you look through our budget, intergovernmental will be a new line. It would not exist in last year's budget. It's there now because we have developed a relationship with the town of Woodbridge to address or to handle information technology services. HVAC upgrades, the microgrid. We're really close on the microgrid. They got some testing that's coming up either this weekend or next. We did bond projects, and actually the management of those projects allowed us to save enough money to do 2 additional HVAC projects through that fund. We continue to enhance security and Energy Star. All 3 of our schools now are Energy Star rated. If you take a look at somewhere through the budget, you'll see where our electricity use is. And you can see that electricity use has, on average, dropped 190,000 kilowatt hours per year, the last 5 years. So when we're looking for how well, I know the fund balance is a big issue. There's where some of the money comes from right there. In technology, students now, so I have a card that allows me to get in the building and allows me to print things, and students have one that allows them to print things, and when they're late, they come into the attendance desk and there's no big line, they scan, it goes into the computer. Speaking of attendance, you go down the list there, the Computer Logic Advanced Attendance Tracking Module. What it does is it allows us to communicate more quickly with students about where they are in attendance and the possibility of losing credit. A good thing for families. The process, we start in August. We develop this budget. We go out to the towns, and we are here now. We presented first last night to the Amity Finance Committee, and we'll hit each one of the towns, and then the board will go ahead and consider it for approval at the February meeting, and then, of course, we have our referendum in May. Those are all the times that we'll go ahead and present something associated with the budget. So let's get right to the money. We are presenting a 1.87% increase in expenditures, and that's the entire budget. So the 1.87% increase, I'll give you some of the details of that. What it means for the towns. If you remember last year, there was some uncertainty in the state. I don't think the uncertainty has gone away, but as part of the budget process, we included the possibility that special education funding may not come to Amity and instead go to the towns. So because of that way that we addressed revenue, right now you don't have to do that because it is coming to Amity. So when we send out the bills for allocations to the towns, we're not including that additional piece. So we will pick up revenue compared to this year's budget. So that increase in revenue means that this 1.87% increase in expenditures translates to a 0.54% increase in allocation to the towns. Again, expenditures are here at 1.87% increase, but because of increased revenues, the allocations to the towns are only at about 0.5%. And so if you take a quick look there, you'll see that and a reminder that the allocations are not equal to each of the towns because they're based on average daily membership. As your enrollment goes up or goes down, so does the allocation in comparison to the other towns. So we had a little bit of a decrease in Bethany, a little bit of a decrease in Woodbridge, and I reminded you, I think a year or two ago, in 2 years or 3 years from now, you're going to see a pretty good spike in the Woodbridge students that go to Amity. So that would mean a pretty good spike in your allocation. Bethany actually sees a decrease of $140,000 or 1.5%. Orange sees an increase. Out of that orange increase of $325,000, $200,000 of that is associated with just greater enrollment, just more students. Woodbridge sees an increase of $73,000 or 0.49%. To put that in perspective, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the numbers, that $73,000 increase, we just wrote checks to the towns for the fund balance that was returned. So $561,000 of that went back to Woodbridge. Plus, if you take into account what I was just talking about with the special education funding that we anticipated, but that we're not allocating to the towns, that's about another $178,000. Historically, our 5-year average, and as a reminder, throughout the presentation, we try to use 5 years so that it doesn't, so we're not using 7 sometimes or 3. We try to use 5 for everything, just to be consistent. Over the last 5 years, our average increase has been 2.12%. You can find this in the, I won't go through it, you can find this in the budget document, but I just want to be clear on, we put a whole bunch of assumptions into making forecasts and how we're going to predict, and that transparency piece is right there. That's where they are. They're all right there. And so if you ever look through this and go, hey, you know what, I'm not so sure that that's really a 12% increase, maybe the industry says it should be 6%. We've made changes in the past based on your financial expertise and understanding. You know what? While we're here, I'll hit on a couple of these that I think are important. Affordable Care Act, when we talk later about staffing, we've added somebody over the last couple of years in order to manage our Affordable Care Act type of work. Medicaid, if you're following the changes in the recent laws, schools are going to be required to, or are required to, I'm sure Terry's making a face right now behind my back, because of the requirements associated with Medicaid. So this is going to be a large burden on districts. And even if we were to outsource the billing for it, the paperwork associated with it is overwhelming. So you could anticipate in the next year or so, if that continues to be in place, that we would have to add staff in order to manage it. Pension, sick, and severance, and OPEB trust. OPEB means other post-employment benefits. When you take a look in the budget, you will see that our contribution to OPEB has decreased. The reason I bring that up is one of the things that we have done is tried to have 5 years in our plan and to make decisions that smooth out increases. In the past, it's easy to budget with what I wouldn't call I call temporary adjustments. Let's cut all technology, and we'll just put it later. Well, that decreases the budget this year, but produces increases in the future. So we've tried to create plans, and I'll show you that even these things out. One of the things that the Amity Finance Committee and Amity Board of Education have done very well is make contributions to retirement, and it's paying off now. So when you see in there, you also see sick and severance. It's not a negative, but it definitely decreases dramatically. That has to do with how we've addressed our funding and how we've addressed negotiations. We have made all but one of our non-certified bargaining units on defined contribution plans as opposed to defined benefit plans. Long-term savings. Here are those 5-year plans. Facilities capital improvement, and you'll see that they're kind of constant across, except for last year. The facilities bonding, and actually these are, somehow I put the wrong one up there. Yeah, I thought I updated the fund drive. Those values under 2021 move back 1 year. They're actually under the 2019 year. I apologize. Technology capital improvement, 5 years. We've added textbooks and digital resources to try to get them to even out over the 5 years. Technology bonding is part of the one-to-one initiative, and that would be in the 1920 year, as well as the facilities bonding. These bonding projects are reviewed by the facilities committee and the finance committee, and before they're up here now so that you know exactly what's coming in the future. Every budget involves some risk. Ours is associated with state grants. You know, there's some very interesting things about state grants. There's some that we qualify for and some that we don't, and some that are changing based on our student population. Staff turnover and vacancy savings, we make estimates each year, but we're not sure who's going to retire or who's going to leave. Medical and dental insurance, we are self-insured, so we're responsible for all claims. We've had a very good history lately, so our increase in this budget for healthcare is not 8, 9, 10, 11, 12%. It's 5. That's a risk. Special education, tuition and transportation, you'll see that there's a little bit of a decrease this year. We do a very good job of properly placing students, and most of the time that proper placement is right here at Amity. A great staff and great programs. So, we get questions frequently about the fund balance, and I talk about having a trip and being on a trip and having this fuel tank where you decide how much fuel you need to make it throughout the year. And that's pretty much what we do with the budget. But there is no, for a regional school district, there is no alternative funding other than going back to the towns and asking for additional. So there is nothing below empty here. And so we've asked industry experts and we've asked our auditors what's appropriate for fund balance. And I'll give a little bit more about that. Over the last 5 years, that's what's made up our fund balance. Some of it financial management, some of it special education savings, and some of it unforeseen. If you take a look at those 5 years all together, you'll see that roughly 60% of it is things that we couldn't have anticipated, 15% of it is good financial management, and 28% is specifically savings on special education. What does that amount to in terms of the percentage for our budget? On average, the last 5 years, 2.8%. That's at the high end of what our auditor would consider reasonable, somewhere between 1 to 3. So we're within that range, and it's something that when we take a look at what it's spent on, you know, I think the challenge here is the same as when I talk to the board about negotiations. A team goes through negotiations, and then you go ahead and you present the budget, you present the contract to everybody, and somebody always asks, well, did we really get rubber boots for, and it's one slice of a large process. The fund balance is one slice of a large process. If we didn't have these documents and this reporting and all the stuff that goes on to make this so transparent, I would probably be more concerned. The fact that we know, and we can tell you right now, where it goes and what happens to it, I'm pretty comfortable with our operations. The dark blue is money that is specifically returned back to the towns. The gray is money that has been advanced to the next budget. Now you'll notice that in 16 and 17 that doesn't exist anymore, and you probably heard me tell you a couple years ago, we're not doing that. All that does is one of those pieces that artificially, well, it doesn't artificially change the budget, but it makes it harder the next year. If we advance money from the previous year to the next, then you had some additional revenue that when you get to the next year you won't have anymore. So there's some years where the allocations are less than the budget, like now, and there's some years where the allocations are greater than the budget, and we're trying to keep them pretty close. Take that over 5 years, and 63% of fund balances have been returned directly to the towns. 7% were advanced to the next year, 30% were used on major non-budgeted items. But one of those being the heat exchanger, yes? And so the heat exchanger, a money saver for the towns in terms of the fact that we pay very little, if anything, for hot water at Amity Regional High School right now because of the fuel cell. You can see in the budget exactly where that has gone. Any part of the money that was assigned to future years or the money that was spent. You'll notice that in self-insurance there was 1 year where we did populate the reserve, and that's where the biggest chunk of that has gone. 5 years, $4 million returned to the towns. 70% of that fund balance has gone to reduce taxpayer burden. That's the 63 that was returned plus the 7 that was advanced to future years. One of the other things that we get a question about is that, hey, if we're talking the budget to budget average, so the budget to budget average has been about 2% over 5 years. Well, Chip, actually, since that's budget to budget, and because you gave money back to the towns, you had a fund balance, that actual to budget is huge. Well, that's one way to look at the budgeting, I would agree. I think a better way to look at the budgeting is actual to actual. If we take a look at what was actually spent, and not compare it to what was budgeted, but what was actually spent, the increase has been less than 1.5% on average for each of 5 years. Here's one graph that we simplified a little bit. Instead of 40 categories, there are 5. You take a look at that and you'll see that 66% of our budget goes to salaries and benefits. As a reminder, for a municipality, regional school districts are responsible for debt service. Debt service is 9% of our budget. That's not something that's in the Beecher budget, for example. The 5 major categories here: salaries, an increase of about $500,000. Benefits, actually a slight decrease due to the savings primarily in healthcare.
Some in healthcare, some in OPEB trust.
Some in OPEB trust. Special education, we see a decrease of about $50,000. And then debt service, because we did do the bonding, has increased. And all other accounts are increased only by about $260,000. Percentages. One comparison that we do, since it is salaries that are driving our budget, the average salary increase for our employees this year or going into next year is 2.5%, 2.45, and yet our budget is consistently lower than that, an important piece to point out. We are asking for one additional 2/10 of a position. 2/10 of a position means one class period. We would increase somebody's assignment, and that is for strings at the high school. We've added paraeducator on here. We're not actually adding a position. This is an example of a budget move. So because the para was originally funded by grant and we need to make some changes, it needs to be funded by us because we don't qualify for that piece of the grant anymore, we have to pick up the cost of $23,000 or so. Historically, our staff, our certified staff over the last 5 years has decreased by more than 4 people. That's excluding special education. All certified staff, a decrease of 2.6. Total FTE increased by 4.4. You have to know a little bit about this. If you take a look at the efficiencies line, the 1.0, we added a maintainer. So we found last year that we were paying people to do services that we had somebody who could do those services. So now Randy is in that position as maintainer and saves us thousands of dollars. So this is a good position to have. As well as modifications in security, special education is heavily paras, as you can see there. Enrollment projections for the community. You take a look at the very top line, PK-12. Now there are a lot of lines on there. That red one that only extends 2/3 away across the page was the prediction from 3 or 4 years ago. And so the most important thing to see from this graph is that it was predicted that enrollment was going to be dropping over the next 10 years, 3 years ago. Now you take a look at that 10 years and we're essentially level with a slight increase a little bit out there. So I'd say we're going to be relatively constant for the next 3 or 4 years. Well, one of the areas where we've made some adjustments in terms of medical, we have been maintaining a 20% medical reserve. We're asking that it be 25%. As the number of people participating in our plan has decreased, our exposure percentage-wise has increased. So 25% is something that is more appropriate for our population. We can do that with current savings in medical. Some municipalities, when they save on a monthly basis in medical, they'll take that savings and they'll put it in the medical reserve. We do not. Part of our transparency. It goes into our fund balance and it's reported at the end of the year. And only at the end of the year would the board have the opportunity to go ahead and push that into medical reserve. We are looking at our first phase of a one-to-one mobile device implementation at a cost of about $150,000. That's part of what the grant was for, to do the education associated with that. We're balancing that with not doing some of the replacements that we would normally do for desktops, and students will have devices. Total increase of $55,000. You've seen these before. These are regular things for building improvements. We replace corridor flooring, we sand and paint gym floors, and we maintain the contingency. The one new thing is signage for the media center in Orange. You've seen these before. Our site improvements generally are minimal, and these include the 2 things that are done every year: sidewalk repair and preparing to resod the football field. That's all weather dependent. as I mentioned earlier, our bonding, you'll see that the bonding has, if you look at the far right column, in the far right column, our gross debt there is decreasing and then dramatically decreases when you get out to the 2026 year. I spoke about average daily membership. The specific changes in average daily membership, Bethany sees a decrease of about 0.4%. Woodbridge sees a decrease of about 0.01%. Orange, for the first time in recent history, has more than 50% of the students who are attending Amity. Because of revenues, the cost is not split exactly by that population. And this is simply a repeat of the initial slide. So 1.87% increase in expenditures translates to a 0.54% overall increase in allocation to the towns, and specifically for Woodbridge, a 0.5% increase in the request from Amity. I hope that wasn't too fast. That was really the high points. I hope that at some point you'll have a chance to go through the document and ask questions associated with it, but I'd be glad to take anything you have right now. Oh, and I have little cards with the summary. So that when somebody asks you, you don't have to remember what you saw here. You can go ahead and
Pretty clever, Chip.
So. And we'll leave a couple extras.
I got a bunch.
Yes, you got one already. You haven't given it away yet?
No, I got a bunch here.
All right.
Cheat sheets, don't leave home without them.
Yeah.
So Chip, I will say that getting this in advance was a huge advantage.
Great.
In terms of really being able to look through it.
Okay.
I very much appreciated the explanation of the risk factors and also the source and the use of the fund balance. Because
pleasure.
normally it's after the fact and it's like, okay, it's already all done, and this way we can really look at it beforehand. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. So there's something that if you are really paying attention when you go through the line items in the budget, you're going to see something that I should explain. So what you'll see is if you look under Pupil Services and District Office, or you look under the schools and you look under psychologists and physicians, you'll see that the schools picked up a huge number of psychologists, and central office lost a huge number of psychologists. There were no staffing changes, there's an accounting change. The state of Connecticut used to simply say, tell us what you have in special ed. Now they say, tell us what you have in special ed and disaggregate by school. So all of our special ed clerical staff and sports staff and paras and teachers used to be, or not teachers, but psychologists and some others, used to all be central office designated. And now they've been pushed out to each of the schools. So you'll see central office decrease by hundreds of thousands of dollars in special ed staff, and the schools increase. So you see that. And as I was walking around, Joe, I saw you write down per pupil. And so, really interesting.
Hey, you're not supposed to be. So what's our per pupil expenditure, and how does that rank in the DERG? How does that compare to the
And the best thing to do is I can send you from we are, Amity, Orange, Bethany, and Woodbridge are all relatively close together. It's difficult, if you were to take our budget and say $49 million and divide by 2,400 students, and you go, holy cow, that's not even close. And it's not, because the state normalizes that for some good reasons. One is transportation is pulled out of that calculation, because otherwise you've got New Fairfield being penalized for being a bigger physical district. The other thing that's pulled out is you'd have to pull debt service out. Since municipalities don't pay debt service, 9% of our budget is associated with something that's not part of the per pupil expenditure. So it's around 17,000. Do you know what it is?
It's a little over 17,000.
It's a little over 17,000. And it's comparable to the three-member towns.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
And how much is the special ed per pupil?
Oh, goodness. Special education per pupil expenditure, I do not know. Is that something that we calculate?
We don't normally.
Yeah, the individual needs each year vary so much that it's not something that we normally calculate. So I guess we could go ahead and find that out. Let me take a little look into that. Am I holding up a bunch of people behind me? Is that what's happening?
No.
All right.
Chip, you said there was one of your slides was incorrect.
Yeah,
Could you just get the correct one?
it's all correct in there.
It's correct in here?
You
Okay,
bet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one quick question. The transition services that we're looking at the fire department for.
Yes.
Where would that fall under the expenses? Which line item?
So, it would normally cost us, and so that would be under the special education tuition and transportation. So, because there is some uncertainty in how this whole plan will come together, that we need a safety net. So the safety net for us is we have essentially 5 students who'd be participating in that program. And normally, one of the options, if we're not going to address it in district, would be to send them to a program like the Hamden Transition Program. So we budgeted for the Hamden Transition Program at roughly $45,000 per student for tuition plus transportation, times 5 is about $250,000, plus the transportation piece. So we're working within that budget to whether we have to do build out here at the firehouse or our transportation to the local university. But our local program would be more cost efficient than a tuition program.
Anything else? All set?
Thanks so much for letting me be here. If they don't go through Matt, they can come directly to me. That's fine. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have on that.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so
Thank you,
much.
Chip.
Yep.
Okay, next up is the Fire Commission, which is tab
12:30.
1230. This is our first town budget. I guess we're looking for highlights.
Okay.
You don't have to go line by line, I think.
I have some information I'd like to show you, and then I guess some information if we could just talk about maybe the fire we had a couple weeks ago. I know I gave a briefing on it. I didn't give it to the Board of Finance, but we actually have some video. I don't know if anybody's seen this, exactly how bad the conditions were and what we were facing when we got there.
I saw it.
You saw last night. This was early on. The first engine got into the driveway and we started stretching hose. You could see the water coming off the side of the house over there in the front. The other thing we were really fighting on this was the wind. We had 40-mile-an-hour winds and the temperature was, with the wind chill, was about -15. So anything we did was basically freezing on contact. We had 6 injuries that night. We had slip and falls. We had a medical issue. We just had a lot of things going against us. On top of, we had the blizzard the day before where we had roughly 15 inches of snow that we had to stretch hose line out. So you can see the power line down there. That's the thing hanging on the left-hand side of the screen. We had to wait for UI to get there because we couldn't pull hand lines off of the attack engine that's in the driveway because the power line was right in the way and we couldn't get anybody electrocuted. But as you can see in this, the fire was so hot it caught the vehicle that was in the driveway on fire. So we had to put that out along with the fire, but you could see the wind really whipping through that fire that night. All the guys had roughly a 1/4 inch of ice on them from the water. Everything was freezing on contact, as you can imagine. We also had a lot of damage done to equipment, and I just brought something just to show you. This is a nozzle that was used that night, one of them that got damaged. And you can see where this is what we call a smoothbore nozzle, so the water comes out of here. The nozzle's tight here, and we've got a big gap here. The nozzle actually bent from the water, so if the lines, if they shut the water off for about 45 seconds to a minute, the line would be frozen solid and we couldn't use it. We had to go back and pull another line off the truck to start flowing water again. So we had a lot of issues at this, but it just gives you a sense of what we were looking at, what we were facing, and sometimes a picture speaks 1,000 words. So. So, the next slide I want to talk about is, just so I know people have heard about it, people have asked about it. We had back in December, we had a car accident where a car hit an oil tanker head on, and it rolled the oil truck. And we had, this is on Racebrook Road, we had to extricate the victim from the car. At the time, we could scroll through the pictures in. You can see that's the car, the oil truck on its side. It was leaking some diesel from its saddle tanks. But you can see the heavily damage on the vehicle, and then scroll to the next picture. That's looking in through the passenger compartment of the vehicle. And that's the driver compartment. So the victim basically broke the steering wheel off of the steering column, which shows you the impact, and the front tire is just about into the driver compartment, and she was heavily pinned. What I thought was interesting to show you guys this tonight is we sit here during budget season all the time, and the questions come up, why do we need this tool, why do we need that tool? Well, Rescue 1 holds a simul system where it can run 4 tools simultaneously at one time, and Engine 7 can run 2 tools simultaneously at the same time. In this particular accident, we used all 6 tools at the same time, and an extrication that should have taken roughly 50 minutes to an hour, we had the victim out in under 25 minutes, and they didn't think she was going to survive, and she did survive this based on how quick we got her out of the vehicle and got her to the hospital. So you guys should be proud of what you guys have done along with us by allocating this money and keeping up with the equipment every year, because the equipment basically saved her life on this call. So I thought that was important for you guys to see. I have some slides, basically just to give you what our numbers are over the last couple of years. We basically went back 10 years. So this is the number of calls per year. So we went back to 2007. And we've increased it. Now you'll see a spike in 2011 and 2012. Those years in 2011 we had Hurricane Irene, which we responded to a lot. So those numbers, that number could come down if we took the storm out of it. And in 2012 we had Hurricane Sandy, which we responded to a lot of calls. But you can see over the last 2 years, our call volume has increased, and we haven't had any major storms in the last couple of years. We were at 485 last year, we're actually at 521 calls. These are calendar years, so this is where we are as of December 31st. The next slide is firefighter hours. This is the amount of hours the guys spend each year at emergency scenes. These hours are strictly on the scene, and what they do. This doesn't include, and if we take like the Inwood Road fire a couple weeks ago, the call came in about 5:22. We got back to the firehouse. We left an engine on the scene, but we got back to the firehouse about a little after 12 o'clock that night, and we had to start putting the gear back together and getting it back into service because we couldn't wait till the next day. Those hours aren't based in that. That's just strictly emergency hours that were on the scene and doing something on the scene. So if we were to add all those other hours, it would be significantly higher. These are just emergency, all these numbers are basically emergency hours.
Would you be able to determine the total firefighter hours for that call?
We don't keep track of when the guys come back to the firehouse. Once we clear with dispatch from the scene, that's when the clock basically stops, but that doesn't stop when you have to get back hose, fill the trucks up, fill the air bottles up and everything else. So that night, the guys actually didn't leave the firehouse until about 3:30 that morning. So just to put it in perspective.
And in fact, there was a fire call the next morning.
Right.
So that's why it's important, you know, the apparatus needs to stay in service. We can't, you know,
Right,
park
we
it
can't
and
wait.
get it ready the next day or, you know, at anyone's leisure.
The next slide are motor vehicle accidents. So you can see we had an increase in motor vehicle accidents this year. This is not all the motor vehicle accidents that the town of Woodbridge responds to. These are where there's significant accidents where it requires either extrication, there's significant damage to the vehicle where the airbags have deployed, there's fluid on the ground, there's wires down associated with those. So those are significant accidents. You can see how the accidents over the last couple of years have increased in town, and that could be due to a bunch of things. That could be due to texting, distracted driving. So there are a lot of communicators with that.
More traffic.
Right. Okay, so if you want to start with the budget, we can go through.
So Sean, I just have a
Oh, I'm
comment.
sorry.
So these are really good statistics for us to have, and you should include those in your performance indicators. You're obviously tracking them by year, and it really helps us understand much better what you're doing.
Okay.
So it's just a thought.
Okay. Regular clerical, we're looking to increase that line. This is the administrative assistant that works under me and the fire marshal. She does a lot more than just data entry and everything else. So we believe that this raise is warranted to bring her up to this status. She's more of an administrative assistant than clerical.
Well, one of our commissioners last night when we were talking about this referred to this person as the office manager. That's a more accurate job title than administrative assistant in this case because of the functions.
Correct.
So this is a raise, not an increase in hours.
Correct.
Okay.
Full-time employee. Medical expense is the next one that went up. The reason for medical expense, as we talked about in the years past, is EpiPens are absolutely ridiculous in price. Also, we had an increase in firefighters, which is a good thing. We've had a lot of new guys come in, but along with that, this is a mandated thing by OSHA. Each firefighter, each driver has to have a yearly physical, and the town has to have the paperwork back in hand by day 365. If we don't have it in hand on day 366, we have to take their gear and take their privileges away until we have it back in hand. This went back to when OSHA came in last year, and we talked about it, and we had an issue, and this is what we have to do. So it's basically set on, it's basically mandated. We don't really have a lot to say about this.
So are you up to date now with everybody?
We are up to date
having
with everybody
physical?
now, and we constantly rotate. Yep, so basically everybody needs to have it within 365 days, but they have to basically call like 10 and a half months into it because it takes a couple weeks to get an appointment.
Sure.
And then they have to go for their physical, and then it usually takes a few weeks to actually get the results back. So hopefully we'll have enough to keep moving forward. So we're trying not to have the same guy in the same fiscal year go twice, if that makes sense.
Chief, can you explain exactly what physical entails?
Yeah, so each person gets a full physical. If you're 40 and under, you get a stress test every third year. If you're 40 to 50, you get a stress test every other year, and if you're 50 and above, you get a stress test every single year. And then all the drivers have to get DOT cards from the state, so that's also we also do that, so they can drive the apparatus. So, but I think it's important to note also on that is the guys have to take the day off from work, especially if they go for a stress test, because the physical takes about 2 hours, and then you have to drive down the street, go in for your next appointment,
else.
wait there, and then you go for your stress test, which takes about it's roughly another hour or so. So basically the individual takes the day off from work. So, just so
You
everybody
can't get
knows that.
Saturday appointments.
Right.
We're not talking about the cost per physical.
Cost for physical, it depends. If you're basically, if you're in your 20s and early 30s, and you don't need a stress test, it's usually about $350, give or take. If you need a stress test every year, so the guys 40 and above, usually are about $400 to $500, and the guys that are over 50 are usually about $650 a physical, just to put it in perspective. And then a new hire, a new guy coming in, is roughly $800 for the entry-level physical that they need to do.
And so what's happened to try and keep these within so that these are all accomplished within the calendar year, over time, averaging out, you're doing really more than one a year per person, because you're on basically an 11-month schedule. So that over time, that represents an increase in the expense, in addition to rising prices for medical expenses and age of firefighters and the other things that Sean already mentioned.
Next line that we're looking to go up is 52225. It's called volunteer incentives. It's more of a retirement program. I've talked to Tony about we should rename that line because it's really not the right way. It's more of a retirement program that was set up for the guys back in the late 80s, early 90s. And we haven't increased that line since I believe it was 2010. So it's been quite some time, and we're looking to increase that based on the new guys coming in and just the membership. That line is based on basically years of service that you have in the department. So.
And is this
More of a
something that's,
retention
is this paid out
Yes.
at a particular time for a firefighter?
It's usually we usually pull a purchase order in July. It's usually paid, I want to say it's September, October-ish.
But is it paid across all the firefighters?
Yes. Well, they have to hit minimums. So a guy that doesn't show up is
Okay.
not eligible for it. You have to hit minimum. So like you have to have 20% of fire calls, 50% of your training as is designated, 50% of truck crews,
Got
and
it.
stuff like that. So
Okay.
there are minimums. So it's just not
Can you
everybody.
explain how this came about? You said it was in the 80s or 90s before that.
It was in the late 80s, early 90s, and most departments have a system like this. Some of them have a retirement program where you don't pay it out every year, you pay into the program every year, and then when they retire or they basically retire, then it's one lump sum payout. This way, we used to do a U.S. savings bond, so the savings bond, I want to say about 8 years ago, it basically went away and it went to the e-savings bond, and it was a lot of computer work. The guys would have to go and create their own account, and then the town would need to go in and move the money into these accounts. But it's basically more of a retention. It was basically a retention retirement program.
So if
than when it was
you come
established.
to a call, then you qualify, you get some.
You don't come to one call and get. You have to make 20%. So you have to make 20% of basically 521 calls this year to be eligible for that,
So
along with
encourages
other
people to
things.
show up.
Absolutely. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, I mean, it doesn't end up being a lot of money for the guys. It's just a little incentive and a little incentive to get out.
And it gets paid into like an IRA.
Right.
It's that kind of investment.
Repair maintenance, machine and equipment. This is always a line that we talk about. It was at 68 last year, got cut down to 57. We're looking to put 68 back in. In years past, last year and this year, we just got over the $57,000 number, so we're going to have to come back for some more money. But over the last few years, that number is going over. Last year went over to I think it was $89,000, and the year before that it was at $120,000. This is all the repairs and maintenance for all the apparatus in the department. Some years are heavier than others, but we believe we need to at least put 68 and keep 68 into the budget for that line.
And by the way, this current year, we're going to have substantial repair expense after the fire on Inwood Road, where we're still getting estimates, but there's the Board of Selectmen know this, but there's a large amount of damaged equipment from the ice.
Repair maintenance vehicle. Vehicle is not really the right word for it. This is all the testing that's done, the mandated testing. This is all the hose testing that has to be done every year. Air pack testing, the DOT inspections on the vehicles, pump testing, the Scott bottle testing, the fit testing, ladder testing.
Is this 53520, Chief?
This is 53520.
Okay.
So it went up $1,000 because we were told that some of these items are going to go up next year. We just don't know how much, but there is going to be an increase, we were told. The next line is basically, if we go to the next page, programs and publicity 54710. This is at 4,500 this year, which is sufficient. Next year we're anticipating 7,000. Last year we were at 9,000. What we did is we had this is all the coloring books, the little red fire hats, the crayons, the bags, the badges, all the stuff we hand out for fire prevention every year. We see well over 1,000 kids. On top of, we do fire extinguisher training for businesses in town. We've done it for town hall in the past. This is where all that comes out of, so we need to increase it. We don't need to increase it back to the 9, but we believe we need 7 to continue to do fire prevention like we've been doing in the past. Technical 55120. It's at 38. We're saying about 40, and that's due to the fact of motor vehicle accidents. We're going through a lot of speedy dry, a lot of drip pans and stuff like that in motor vehicle accidents. And I mean, just to put it in perspective, a week ago Saturday, we were at a motor vehicle accident on Seymour Road, and we went through 12 or 15 bags of speedy dry on one accident, and we were back 3 hours later right down the street, and we used another 5 bags of speedy dry. So it goes, and it's roughly $8 or $9 a bag. So
Technical is the
50 pounds
consumer.
a bag.
I'm sorry,
About 50 pounds a bag.
it's 40-pound bags.
40-pound bags.
Yeah.
So
So
technical
it's-
is the consumables that are used in the emergency activities.
And the other thing to note on stuff like that, we are looking into, and I've had a conversation with Tony, we're looking into it, I didn't even brief the fire commission on it last night, is there might be a way we can charge for some of these services, where we might be able to charge for if we go have a large structure fire like we did and we had damage or we had this, there might be a way to charge for that so the town could recoup some of the money. Same deal on motor vehicle accidents and stuff like that. It may not be a ton of money, but it may be something to offset some of these numbers.
I had a question on professional development, 54,630.
Professional.
That's a big number. You have 60 firefighters? Something like that?
Oh, training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
35,000.
So that does all, that's EMT training, that does bloodborne pathogens, that does all the OSHA mandated NFPA training and the training throughout the year for the guys.
Classes.
And classes also. And like, just to put it in perspective, Firefighter 1, I want to say the cost of tuition now is, I want to say up about $1,400 a student. So it's expensive, it's not cheap. It used to be $600 a student, so it's going up considerably.
Is all that training done locally?
The Valley Fire School usually runs it, so right now they're hosting a Firefighter 1 class up in Bethany. Sometimes it's in Orange, sometimes we actually hosted it. It's usually in the area, it could be in Shelton, but it's usually the Valley towns that do it. And then there's other training that has to happen, and some of the guys have to go to the Connecticut Fire Academy up at Bradley Airport, so that's where that comes out of.
Chief, is the computer 55111, is that office type
computer administrative, or is that?
It's computer, where that line shows computer, it's not necessarily buying desktops out of that. We might buy a desktop here and there, but it's more, all the other stuff. It might be some cabling, it might be some office stuff, it might be some stuff. So it's basically, it's not just strictly, it's not like we're looking to buy $8,000 or $10,000 in computers. It's not strictly just computers. It's another line I've talked to Tony about changing the name to. So it's more,
Computer support,
yeah. Well,
computer hardware.
it's not even support or hardware. It's more hardware, but it could be repair.
Computer
It
stuff.
could be,
They have IT
Computer
support.
stuff.
Well,
Right.
no, but there's another 23,000
Right.
for.
that's our IT.
That's the
Right,
IT.
right. But it was my understanding that the fire department will join in on the town's agreement with Amity to basically purchase IT services through them.
I was never told of that. I don't know.
Fire's not part of it?
Not yet.
Not right now.
They have an
No, I
existing
know.
contract that they're working to complete.
Right, but isn't that gonna be up in July? So it would.
June 30th.
Right, so.
They're gonna look at it, but we're gonna encourage it.
Okay, I would encourage you to look at it.
We will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know it's there for them
Well, it's
to-
that and the computers together in terms of an
Right.
assessment of what's necessary to move forward, what
Right.
kind of services can be provided by, Amity
Right.
IT. Okay.
And we understand that the town is in an experimental period now
Oh, sure.
That's
with
correct.
them, so,
Yeah.
we want to evaluate that before we,
Yeah.
we're not going to buy a pick and a poke.
Right.
Okay?
I
Our
understand.
systems are, it's
Specialized.
essential services, and they work very well right now. And so that's the key, is that everything functions properly and efficiently, et cetera.
What we're referring to there, is that the data processing, or is that the software maintenance?
Software maintenance, it's data processing would be that line. Software maintenance is Firehouse software. It's all our software that we have to use every year. So, licenses and. The next line to look at, and this line is it's almost to the point where it's getting ridiculous, is the hydrant line. It's at we're gonna spend $85,707 this year. It's gonna be going up to $88,450 next year. There's a 3.2% increase from the water company again. Just to put it in perspective, back in 2002, we were paying $38,750 a year, and now we're paying $88,450. And I'm going to say over the last 5 years, or 6 years, it's got to increase almost 25%. It's gone wickedly high.
And that's
And
just
basically,
a
that's
fee for having the
set.
hydrants.
That's set by the DPUC. So if they allow them to increase it, we have to pay it. Basically, we don't pay for water. We pay for access to use the water in the line. So we're paying for footage on the street. Is basically what we do. And the town owns the hydrant. So if a hydrant gets hit and somebody takes off, a motor vehicle accident, somebody takes off, the town is responsible to fix the hydrant at our cost. It's not. No one else picks up the tab for it. Hopefully, if somebody hits a hydrant, they stay with it. Their insurance takes care of it. Hydrant repair can range anywhere from $350 all the way up to about $6,000 a hydrant. So
And that's
it
something
gets
that's billed by the
expensive.
water company. We can't
Yeah, I
send-
was gonna say, that's a pass-through, though, that's not a discretionary in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's not like we can send it out to bid and hire the low
Right.
bidder to
Right.
fix the hydrant. We get billed for it.
Right.
So-
association talking to the DPUC?
We're not talking to the DPUC. No, it's just
Anybody?
it's I guess it's up to the town, but it was stagnant for a while and it wasn't increasing, and then over the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's just every single time we call in around this time, we're going to go up 3%. They were up last year. I want to say they increased 7.4%. The year before it was like 7.8%. So I mean, it's considerable. It's not small, but we're not the only town to deal with this. So like New Haven deals with it, Orange deals with it. The people that have hydrants, and their hydrant bill is obviously a lot more because we only have roughly 136 hydrants in town, where 10% of the town is covered by hydrants. If you go to Orange, almost the entire town of Orange is covered by hydrants. And New Haven, I mean, every corner there's a hydrant, so
Do you refill the tankers using the hydrants?
we do.
Are the sprinkler charges in?
Oh, the sprinkler charges, so the sprinkler connection for this building, the firehouse, the new firehouse, this building, Public Works, the library, Beecher School, and I think there was one more. We pay for that out of that line, so we pay for the fire department connections, and those range from usually around $800 to $2,000 a pop.
Are pool water tankers allowed to use the hydrants?
There's a specific, so there's two haulers. So you have a pool water hauler and then you have a landscaper hauler. They are allowed to use 2 hydrants in town. The pool haulers use the hydrant on the end of Lunar Drive down in the business district, and the landscapers use the one by Clark Road on 69. They have to pull a permit from us every year. It's $250, and it's basically on the honor system how it works now. If we eliminated that and you owned a pool and you needed pool water, they would have to go to New Haven, Cheshire, Hamden to go get pool water, because there's metered hydrants and they have to enter a code in and it tracks the amount of water usage, and then the water company bills them. But we don't have that here, so it actually it's good and it's bad. Depends on how you look at it. You save, if you have a pool and you need pool water, it saves you, because if you're getting charged $400 a load, they could be charging you $600 a load if they had to go farther to go get pool water and get charged for it.
It's also not environmentally friendly to have loaded trucks driving to other towns to fill up to come back and.
But even if we had a metered hydrant, we wouldn't get the money that RWA would get the money for it. That's how it works.
But they're paying $250 a year.
Correct.
Not per fill.
Correct.
Pretty good deal.
Yes, I don't, just thinking, you know.
So that's basically what I have.
Any other questions?
Can I ask you about the electricity usage?
Sure.
Yeah, that's been flat over the past 3 years. Is there any way to get that down with efficiency?
We think we have an efficient bill, number one.
Well, you have to turn lights off sometimes.
36,000. That's where it's been across the board. And I think we always come in under that line. So we're not actually spending 36,000.
They have their own meter? They have their own meter, their own bill?
Yeah.
That's about the same for this building.
Remember, the trucks all get plugged in 24/7. They keep the batteries up. The breathing air compressor's running. You got the air compressor to keep the brakes up in the trucks. That all runs. So
And each
there's a lot of equipment
Each
that's
locker
running.
has a charging station, so every
Correct.
time-
So each
but
firefighter has a
every
charging
year
station
it's
for a
been
flashlight
charging
and for a
24/7.
portable radio. So we actually do use a lot of power even if the building's not occupied.
In terms of the lights, it's efficient lighting, and a number of the lights have been replaced with
LED.
Not all of them, but I think the number have been replaced with LED lighting. The lights are on for safety, so that when a firefighter responds in the middle of the night, is not running across a dark parking lot and entering a dark building. And there are, emergency stairway lighting is on 24 hours all over town, in every public building, including this one and the library. So that's some of what you might see.
You know, there's an old saying in sailboat racing, you can save weight even if you just get a haircut. There are always efficiencies that you can find.
Any other questions?
In regard to the initiative with the school system and the IT, is there communication that we should have in terms of what your requirement, what the other, like with the fire department requirements are?
The town is beginning on March 1st. Hopefully that's our target date. And we're going to take it on a month-to-month basis. We'll certainly share with the fire department our experiences. And we're hopeful to have, be able to work forward and work together with the fire department with that.
Anything else? Thank you.
Can we put out more chairs so people don't have to stand out in the hall?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch
Yeah, I
stacked
know,
there.
They're all out there stacked up in the corner.
100% preventative.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's just give it a couple minutes for everybody to get on.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, Bob. How are you?
Actually gotten a little better, so just about an hour.
But that's money like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna, afterwards, we're gonna,
Well, that's fine.
after the presentation.
Where are we now?
Is this presentation, then it is 19.
Who's missing? Give us 1 minute to get somebody else here.
Oh, they're both individual.
Anybody?
No, it's on the
Yeah.
Come on, would you shake up our 2 members out there?
Yeah.
They're over there. They're probably getting pizza.
Someone.
No?
They were there.